As the old English adage goes that even the finest dancer must eventually leave the stage, it was the turn of Erias Lukwago to take his final bow after a stormy, theatrical and often bruising 15-year reign as Kampala's Lord Mayor. In what felt more like a political memoir wrapped in a farewell address, Lukwago painted his tenure not as a smooth drive through City Hall, but as what he called an unruly horse ride. In his final State of Kampala address, the opposition politician revisited what he described as the original sin of his administration, the birth of the new KCCA structure in 2011. According to Lukwago, the revamped arrangement came with a bloated leadership structure, spawning offices upon offices, layers of bureaucracy, and a budget system he implied often worked against the political leadership of the city rather than for it.
The new legal regime ushered in an alien and cloudy governance structure with the conjoined two clusters of leaders, that is 467 elected leaders, excluding the lower administrative units, the LC1 and LC2s, 2 ministers, 6 resident commissioners, and 18 assistants, the executive director, deputy executive director, and 10 directors, as well as the 5 town clerks, which largely accounts for a political imbroglio that has bedeviled the institution of KCCA since inception. That structure, which is amorphous, that I have talked about there.
And if bureaucracy was the appetizer, presidential directives were the main course. Lukwago accused the city's governance system of being routinely steered by presidential decrees, which he argued consistently overshadowed the authority of Kampala's elected leaders.
The KCCA administration has regrettably witnessed direct control and intervention by the president over the capital city's governance, almost in all sectors: public transport, markets, circles, allocation of public assets, land and drainage channels, procurement processes, physical and neighborhood planning, etc. Related to this is the uncodified policy of subjecting access to charity fund by the institution of KCCA from foreign philanthropists to the presidential approval. This policy thwarted the efforts of the Office of the Lord Mayor to secure charity funds from several potential donors, including the US dollar 500,000, that is 1.8 billion, from Hilton Foundation through the New York-based Mayor's Migration Council, where I have been a founding executive member.
He also took aim at what he termed the overlapping mandates of Kampala ministers and resident city commissioners, arguing that offices meant to supervise had over time evolved into power centers, making decisive interventions in city affairs.
Proper management of the city has been greatly impaired by the incongruous practice of the ministers for Kampala and other CCs, whose statutory mandate is largely supervisory and guidance in nature, turning to day-to-day administration of the institution and micromanagement of the state affairs, to the extent of arrogating themselves adjudicatory powers over petty local disputes ordinarily under the jurisdiction of local administrative units.
But perhaps the sharpest arrow in his farewell speech were reserved for what he described as cartels and mafias operating within the city. With visible frustration, Lukwago claimed that powerful interest groups allegedly protected by the state had for years pushed dubious development projects onto Kampala residents.
It is by the grace of the Lord that I survived the death on several occasions in nerve-wracking battles over public assets like Nakasero Market, Pakayadi Market, City Abattoir, Kiseka Market, Nachivo Settlement, Bati Valley Primary School, Nkuruma Health Center, Nachivo Channel. Majority of these mafias and cartels operate primarily through state protection, institutional manipulation, and false narratives of development, blackmail, and outright lethal threats. However, despite the attempts to demonize and vilify me as being belligerent and anti-development, my resolve has remained unshaken up to this very moment, and I am quite confident posterity will judge me fairly.
Yet amid the grievances, the farewell was not entirely a lamentation. Lukwago pointed to what he considers achievements during his long and often combative stewardship of the capital.
The executive director leads us to the tent, and the Lord Mayor hands over everything, including inclusive of what I've talked about.
And so, after 15 years of public clashes, political standoffs and dramatic City Hall episodes, Kampala's outspoken Lord Mayor finally leaves the stage, not quietly, but in the same style that defined his tenure, with criticism, conviction, and one last swing at the system he says never stopped swinging at him. David Ijjo, NTV, at the Kampala Capital City Authority headquarters.